In July 1947, a U.S. Army press release said it plainly. We recovered a flying disc, not a theory, not a leak. An official Army statement, printed in the local paper, signed off by an intelligence officer. 24 hours later, the story changed completely. And it's been changing ever since. Some stories were never meant to be found. New Mexico, July 1947. 2 years after the end of World War II. The Cold War hadn't even been given its name yet, but everyone in this part of the desert already understood what it meant to live near it. Roswell Army Airfield wasn't just any base. It was home to the 509th Bomb Group, the only unit in the entire world at that time, trained to deliver a nuclear weapon. This was the most closely watched patch of desert in the country. About 75 miles outside of town, a rancher named Mac Brazel worked land that most people would call empty. Sheep, sagebrush, and silence. On June 14th, he'd heard a strange explosion during a storm, different from thunder. It wasn't until early July that he rode out to check on his flock and found out what it had left behind. Debris, scattered across a wide stretch of his property, not a scrap pile, but a debris field, hundreds of feet across. Brazel had lived on this land his whole life. He knew what a weather balloon looked like. He knew what wreckage from a plane looked like. This wasn't either. Pieces of thin metallic material that, when he crumpled it in his hand, unfolded itself back into shape. No creases, no memory of being bent at all. Sticks, like foil-covered balsa wood, some of them marked with symbols that looked less like writing and more like something between hieroglyphics and geometry. None of it burned. None of it looked like it belonged to anything Brazel had ever seen come out of a factory, a plane, or a balloon. He gathered some of it up, and the next day, he drove into town to tell the sheriff. The sheriff didn't dismiss it. He called Roswell Army Airfield directly. Within hours, officers from the base's intelligence office were out at the ranch, collecting material, photographing the field, and taking Brazel's account. One of those officers was Major Jesse Marcel, intelligence officer for the 509th. Decades later, Marcel would describe the same material Brazel did, metal that couldn't be dented with a sledgehammer, that returned to its original shape no matter how it was folded. He would go on record saying, plainly, that in his years of military service, he had never seen material like it before, and never saw anything like it again. On July 8, 1947, something happened that has never happened before or since in a case like this. The United States Army issued an official press release stating that it had recovered a crashed flying disc. The Roswell Daily Record ran it as the front page headline that same day. The 509th Bomb Group had captured a flying saucer. This wasn't a tabloid. It wasn't a witness account leaked to a reporter. It was a public information officer, acting on orders, releasing an official statement to the press on behalf of the United States military. The story went out over the wire services within hours. Newspapers across the country picked it up. For one single day, the official position of the U.S. Army was that a flying disc had crashed in the New Mexico desert and that the military had it in its possession. Less than 24 hours later, the story reversed itself completely. A new press conference was held, this time featuring the wreckage laid out for photographers. What the cameras showed wasn't strange metal or symbol-marked sticks. It was the ordinary tangle of a weather balloon and a radar reflector, the kind used routinely by the military at the time. The official record was corrected. Not a flying disc. Just a weather balloon. Case closed, as far as the Army was concerned, for the next several decades. It stayed closed until 1994, when the Air Force, under pressure from a federal records request, issued a new, updated explanation. The wreckage wasn't from a standard weather balloon, after all. It was from Project Mogul, a highly classified program using high-altitude balloon arrays to secretly detect Soviet nuclear tests. In 1947, admitting that would have exposed a program the government wasn't ready to reveal. So instead, They told a smaller, more forgettable lie. Weather balloon. That explanation accounts for a great deal. Project Mogul balloon arrays did use foil, sticks, and tape with symbols, some of it printed by a New York toy company that supplied classified military contracts, which would explain markings that looked unfamiliar to a New Mexico rancher. It explains why the material seemed unusual for its time. It explains, at least partially, why the government's story changed. Classified programs don't get corrected in public. They get buried under simpler cover stories. What it doesn't fully explain is Jesse Marcel's account, a trained military intelligence officer describing material that, in his own words, didn't behave like anything he understood metal or foil to behave like. And it doesn't explain later testimony from other military personnel and morticians in the area, describing conversations about small caskets and unusual autopsy requests around the same time. Accounts that surfaced decades after the fact, difficult to verify, and just as difficult to dismiss outright. What's left, nearly 80 years later, is a case with an official explanation on paper, a documented cover story admitted to by the government itself, and a set of first-hand witness accounts that still don't fit neatly inside that explanation. Some stories were never meant to be found. This one was found twice, once as a flying disc and once as a balloon. Which telling do you believe? Tell me in the comments which explanation makes more sense to you, Project Mogul, or something the cover story still doesn't account for. And if Rendlesham Forest pulled you in, Roswell is the case that started it all. Subscribe to the Unburied because the next one goes even further.